Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Dead Kings podcast, where royal blood and ancient wisdom meet modern times for a holy union of life and death. All right, so I'm David Lovewell,
I'm Frank.
and today we're just going to talk about some things that revolve around the name of this podcast. So, the ideas of kingship and apotheosis. You want to start us off?
Well, kingship, in the sense that we're speaking, I think, has a different meaning than most people would immediately think of when they hear the word in the modern time, because we don't have kings, really, at least not where we live.
Not what most people think of as kings.
No, yeah, this is...
Well, we kind of live in a world where everyone has the amount of wealth that kings used to have.
Oh, yeah.
And in some sense, the potential easily for the level of freedom that kings used to have.
Yes, sovereignty.
Yeah, but that has kind of gotten overlaid with like chattel slavery, psyop, brainwashing of the masses to where people have enough meaningless wealth to keep them distracted and they don't have any actual control. In the far end of that, like you will own nothing and be happy type of the spectrum, but that's only one pole of the spectrum. The other pole, I would say, is the opposite of actual kingship in the modern world, which to me is, in the archetypal sense, a king and a kingdom go hand in hand. A king is one who has a territory that they, number one, protect everything inside of it, and number two, create healthy order and abundance. So at the smallest scale, our body ideally is our kingdom. People aren't doing things to our body that we don't want them to. We control it, but it expands out to our household and our friend group and beyond, people who have businesses that other people interact with. That's like an ecosystem of sorts. I think of brands in that way, or this ideological ecosystem that some people live inside of and they understand themselves.
And they owe fealty to.
Yeah, which they pay through, whatever means, if it's their attention watching something or money that they're giving to something. That ecosystem, though, a king is one who is devoted to maintaining the order and the abundance and protecting it at whatever scale.
Yeah, the one thing that just occurred to me about that fealty is that it's always self-imposed. Nobody...
What do you mean when you say fealty?
Your brand loyalty, essentially.
Brand loyalty.
Brand
loyalty.
In this case. It's self-imposed. Nobody's holding a gun to your head and making you choose Coke over Pepsi or whatever. Or, one, brand over another. Those were just examples.
What's the traditional definition of fealty to you in the old sense?
I don't think I can pull the dictionary definition out right now, but it's something that it's a concept that used to be used, I think, in like feudal kingdoms. You swear an oath of fealty to your liege lord or whatever, whoever owns the majority of property.
So it's loyalty.
Well, that's the thing. In those old societies, most of the time the nobility was appointed. They were given land by the ruling area guy of the area, and they owed him fealty because he gave them land.
Yeah, so it was all like I forget the name of that, where you give your friend a position of power, but nepotism. Yeah, this reminds me what I learned. I don't remember the exact place, but it was through Stephen Flowers and the Woodharrow Institute, I believe, that originally, at least Germanically, kings were elected based on whatever was happening. There was a leader appointed. You want someone aggressive in wartime, but somebody really, reserved and just considerate and patient in peacetime, and just different things. They would choose new leaders based on what the need was And they recognize just because somebody's awesome doesn't mean their kids are going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And the church, in an attempt to erode the power base and take over these areas, instilled this tradition once they got a foothold of the church being connected to the monarchy or whatever. Before it was a monarchy, but they said, you know, there would be the child would be the king, and there was this royal succession, and they realized that the will of the church would transcend generations, but some king might have a shithead weak son ruler that they could easily manipulate. So they created that, and many people now when they think of kings, that's like, oh yeah, it's this succession of things, bloodline, so to speak, but that wasn't actually the traditional institution.
And a lot of times people will just nowadays I've noticed a lot of people will say, well, they were dumber back then. Were they? Or did they just live in a different paradigm?
They definitely weren't dumber.
Different priorities, because all the shit that people prioritize now, they had no idea that was ever going to be a thing. Like,
it's
pre-industry was meant, I think, to just keep going like that ad nauseum.
If you read any average person's writing before the 1900s, the average level of intelligence was so much higher than the average level of intelligence now. It's ridiculous. Their fluency and attention span, I mean, fluency with literature and Shakespeare and language, a rich vocabulary, it has gone down so much since the invention of the American citizen as an employee to the corporation of the United States, which happened after they freed the slaves. They created this legalese switcheroo where a citizen actually, they didn't want these free slaves to have all the rights that they had, so they created a new legal subgroup, but eventually they put all of us in that, and we opt ourselves into it through these contracts. And since then, there's a marked decline in a lot of things in the world. The world wars contributed to it and stuff. But anyway, that's a tangent. I do want to touch on this idea of bloodline, because I feel like that's connected to the impetus and the theme for this show, and that being, to me, the idea of, we'll come back to apotheosis, is connected to this, but I want to talk about this life and death piece. The bloodline of people in general, if you think about it, your bloodline has never died. And people have died, but there's this continuation of blood that has gone from mother and father to child and mingled with other people in this, rhizomatic network, perhaps like a tree. It's this fractal coming down, but it's the bloodline itself is a living thing. And all of these ancestral cults, which was another thing that the church very, very meticulously stamped out because they recognized how much power was in it. People used to bury their dead in their house or under their house or in the mounds on their property, and there was this continual continuity between the dead and the living. And what we would call intuition now would have been the voices of the ancestors, but it wasn't just some imaginary thing. They had a different attunement to the morphogenetic field of resonances and really received wisdom and insight and knowledge from non-local sources that they would call the ancestors and the dead. And just, they honored them as still living things and recognized themselves as this thing that's not really dead or alive in the way that the church made. There's this life, and then there's the afterlife. This thing that supposedly exists. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying there's no distinction. You're already in it. You're already dead. You're already in the bardo right fucking now. This is the afterlife. That's a theme.
You are constantly living in this life and the afterlife at all times. What you
simultaneously.
So what the ancestral blood memory is your higher self, because your higher self is also the higher self of all of your ancestors. And your intuition that you get from your higher self is direct blood memory. It is ancestral memory, 100%. It's your connection to, for lack of better phrasing, the Akashic records. That's like, you're just here to gather information and take it back to your higher self and report back with data because it can't perceive this reality the way that you can. That's why you were created. That's why you were put here.
I think of it as, with quantum stuff, there's wave clouds of probability.
Yeah.
There's waveforms, and then there's particles of actuality. So the past are particles of actuality that we're, standing upon and interacting with.
Yeah.
The future is open probability fields, waveforms, and the present is our consciousness interfacing between
collapsing
the
waveforms.
Yes.
At a constant rate, yeah.
Continuously.
And your higher self doesn't see time, so you can't, they, whatever, can't perceive that.
It can zoom in and out. And I think of that, like you were saying, it's all of the time. So your afterlife, how people remember you, how they talk about you after you're gone, all of the probabilities of timelines that could exist are feeding back to you in this moment based on your actions. In each moment, there's a resonance field of how people are talking about you, potentially the probabilistic field as a tangible thing of how they're talking about you after you're dead or how long you're remembered. And I think the greater the impact that you have and the longer that echo goes, the greater that force of energy coming backwards through time into you is. So there's this weird chicken or the egg thing with achievement and accomplishment and ancestry and bloodline.
That's why it makes all the difference to become in tune with your own perception of everything around you, because so many people are not anymore. They just gloss over so many details, so many important details of living in this reality that they don't stop and, well, I don't know. I can't say for anybody else but myself. Truthfully, I can't. But it doesn't seem like most people really take into consideration that, what we do in this life echoes in eternity, or whatever Gladiator said. But that's exactly what it is. And that moment that you decide to change your perspective and shift to a more positively aligned path is when things start coming back to you, like we were saying, that reciprocity from the future back into the past and back into the ancestry. Like, if you have, generational trauma and you have the ability to perceive that that's what's going on, like maybe you have something going on, whatever, some problem that you can identify the root cause of, then you can make the choice to change and to start acting differently, because you don't want to be ruled by your subconscious. You want to integrate it, right?
Yeah.
So, and when you do that in earnest, when you really make the choice to make a positive change, that's when that reverberation from the future back happens, and that's when you start to see more positive things, because you're gonna find whatever you're looking for, and you got to be looking for the good. You have to be.
Yeah. It's interesting that I was thinking of the word karma as you're talking about that, and it's almost this cliche thing that everybody knows about, but nobody
actually knows about it.
Thinks about it at a deep level. And you talk about the subconscious, even in the Jungian sense of like the individual and the collective. And I think karma was an older understanding of that, or orlog and heminya, these pre-existing things that we inherit. And I see shadow integration as a part of that. How much fucked up shit your ancestors endured and perpetuated, both one and the same. And learning to love and embrace them and be grateful for all of the fucked up shit that they did and endured, because all of it got you here.
Yep.
And to blame them is a form of self-hatred, to see them as lesser. You can recognize maybe some of that wasn't the most skillful way of doing things and creating the result that was wanted. We could update that and change that.
But, that's the whole reason why you're dwelling on that and looking back on that, is because you're the change. You are the thing that makes the difference in this moment. All that matters is what's going on right here, right now. And if you just came to the realization that you're the end of the line for all this generational trauma, then you can be the actual end of the line. You can stop it. You can change it. You just have to be able to identify it. Most people don't, for whatever reason, or take years of therapy to do so.
Yeah, changing it as a worthwhile thing to do. I want to tell a story that I thought of while you were talking about that.
All right.
That made me, because like people, don't think about karma or take it seriously or just want to change these patterns, recognize how much each moment matters for successive lifetimes you're affecting those. I think a general sense, if anybody has seen the movie Cloud Atlas, is a pretty good example of this. It's like throughout time, similar stories that are all affecting each other and interplaying. One time I was working with my Palo Mayombe pot, which had a human skull in it, and they often, none of this is secrets, use gunpowder to like send off intentions and spells really forcefully. And think of fire and smoke as that transition between the realm of the form and formlessness.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And smoke is sort of that in-between phase where it's going from form into formlessness. And but anyway, I had cigars and this little like fucking cup with ashes from just days and months, it filled up, and there must have been an old lighter in there from when it was like didn't work anymore, but I threw it in there. I was put my cigar out in it, and I started hearing psst, psst, and I was like, oh, that's a lighter. And I don't know, I just instinctively grabbed it, and as I picked it up, my life in slow motion, I like seen an arc of butane going towards the candle that's sitting right there in front of me, and everything was just like fire for a second. And there was an adrenal dump where I was like, just for a second, but it got me, my adrenaline going. And
I bet.
I feel like there was like no intention behind that. It wasn't like I was intentionally sending something out, but there was an interaction at that level. And simultaneously, Carolyn was in Peru doing ayahuasca while pregnant with Lulu, and she the night. So after this happened, I had a dream that was really intense, and I'm gonna talk about in a second. But that day and that night, Carolyn got struck by lightning. It struck like outside the house, and she saw it go like through the wall and out of the outlet into her. There was a broom there that it hit on the way. The broom fucking exploded. We have a piece of the wall in the broom here as a memento, but it hit her, and she said it was the most powerful electric shock that she ever felt, and it hurt really bad, but she was totally fine. And so my daughter was struck by lightning in the womb. That's cool.
That's pretty dope.
Yeah.
That happened to Powder.
Yeah.
You remember that shit?
I do. Anyway, that night I had this dream. I'm not going to go into all the details because some of it's pretty personal. I will say that I remembered, and the intensity and the vividness of it, there's like certain experiences, they call them big dreams, not little dreams. It's like big dreams. It's like just permanently scar your consciousness, and your whole causality field is never the same ever again. One of these experiences, when I hear most people talk about past lives, I feel that they're speaking unconsciously, metaphorically, about patterns in their childhood, and that's their way of talking about it and integrating it through a layer of disassociation. I was like, that was my past life. That's my experience of most people talking about these things. Not that most people not that people can't have past life experiences. I just think it's way more intense and less common than all of the new age.
Yeah, every time you hear about it.
Credence for, So I say that. Anyway, I had a memory of my last life and the life before it and this life. And I saw how they were all like, it was like this arc, this wave moving forward. So every movement and shape in each wave affected the next wave. And that's what it was. It was a continuous series of waves. And I died on a horse in the first one in battle. And in the next one, I had a horse. And through interacting with a horse, it triggered this past life memory, and all of this was singularly connected to this life. And I was with Carolyn in this past life, and I fucked her over in some really fucked up ways in that life. And So, but the whole thing, they weren't they like past lives. It was like these are different crests in a singular wave of consciousness
Yeah.
that are all connected and happening right now and affecting each other. And the thing that I took from it that still sticks with me, I was like, everything that I do really fucking matters
Mm-hmm.
and is affecting lifetimes. Like, think about how much, like, what is a lifetime? How long have I been in this fucking body? It's like, well, there's more of them to come, and everything I do is really affecting that. I had a felt bodily gnosis of that made me take these ideas much more seriously. So I just wanted to share that story because I thought it was a cool story.
Yeah. Thank you.
And let's circle back to the idea of apotheosis. You were beginning to say some stuff before we started recording. So, what's your take on it?
So I think what I was going to say before the recording was that death isn't, such a final thing. I can't remember exactly what we were talking about before that, but that's fine. You want to go back to what we were talking about before with the the ancestral memory being intuition from your higher self, the collection of your past iterations, experiences in the all that is your higher self that has sent you here. That part of your higher self opted to be here, volunteered for the job, and to do anything more than live in the moment and experience things to their fullest extent that you can without harming anyone around you, ideally. I think that's really the whole meaning of life. I actually was just talking earlier today to some people about a quote from Robert E. Howard, the author of Conan. And I in reading it and
what's the quote?
Here, let me pull it up.
While you pull it up, I'm just gonna say apotheosis. If you've never heard that word, has two definitions. The broadest one is the highest point in the development of a thing.
Of a thing, yeah.
And the another actual meaning of it and the literal etymology of it means the deification of a thing. So the highest development or possibility being a god. And so apotheosis, the act of becoming a god, deification. And in left-hand path circles and in cringy ways that I usually despise, people talk about self-deification and use the word apotheosis.
Very
in that
mundane
context.
shit. Usually.
But I really think it's a super deep concept.
It is.
And worth pondering. So anyway, quote from Conan's author.
This is from the story Queen of the Black Coast. And it's Conan speaking here. I have known many gods. He who denies them is as blind as he who trusts them too deeply. I seek not beyond death. It may be the blackness averred by the Nemedian skeptics, or Crom's realm of ice and cloud, or the snowy plains and vaulted halls of the Nordheimers' Valhalla. I know not, nor do I care. Let me live deep while I live. Let me know the rich juices of red meat and stinging wine on my palate, the hot embrace of white arms, the mad exultation of battle when the blue blades flame in crimson, and I am content. Let teachers and philosophers brood over questions of reality and illusion. I know this. If life is illusion, then I am no less an illusion. And being thus, the illusion is real to me. I live, I burn with life, I love, I slay, and am content.
Yeah.
And that right there, to me, has the whole meaning of life in it. Doesn't matter what anything anyone else says. Live life to the fullest extent that you can. That's what you're here for. That's what you were sent here to do.
And what that means for everybody is...
Oh, yeah. Totally different.
Totally different. Never mind, that quote makes me want to read Conan at some point.
You should.
It reminds me of the quote, Samsara is Nirvana, which is a tantric adage. And I think of these two opposing schools of mainstream understanding of Buddhism and even like Taoism, Hinduism to an extent, of transcendence, in that this world of physical material energy is in some way lesser than some place that your soul can get to once you evolve beyond the attachments to all of the desires and egoic self-identification patterns here and all this shit. Then the opposing being the imminent, I feel like pre Christian Indo-European Midgard, the middle yard, this place between fire and ice, expansion and contraction. There's a central place between the future and the past. It's like the point of resonance between opposites is here and now. It's imminent. And I think there's truth in both of them. And that's why tantric, these more advanced understandings of the teachings, when they're not just taken literally at face value, lies for children style of the myths, it's recognizing that both things coexist, and nirvana is not necessary. You don't have to escape the wheel of samsara to get into nirvana or whatever. But anyway,
yeah, I was gonna say, I thought those two were like the opposite ends of the spectrum. Turns out they're a horseshoe. Who knew?
Well, if you think about a wheel spinning, and you're on, like, imagine you're on a wheel. It's like the eye at the center of the storm, which, that eye, whether it's the eye of Providence or it's Odin's eye.
Yeah.
But
outside the wheel is the same as right in the middle.
Exactly. The 0 point.
Nice.
Where, the positive and negative cancel out.
Whew.
I think
black holes are interesting.
Stillness being 0. Yeah, black holes. You can go check one out.
Yeah, I'd be down.
Anyway, so these are things that we're interested in, and I find empowering to live with, doing rituals that connect you to your ancestors, and having a space where you can blur the line between you and them infuses a certain power into your being that, even if you go back into mundane life and you're in your little story about yourself and your life and your work, you're changed, and a part of you recognizes you're not limited to that. So this bridge, the soul, I think of as the infinite, which is the non-dual, which is nirvana. It's, you can't talk about it because language and thought in general is comparing opposites and separating things.
It's too clumsy.
Yeah, it can't be separated. It's everything and it's nothing.
Isn't
infinite.
that the Tao that can't be named?
Yes.
Yeah.
So then, but the finite world that we live in, the soul is the bridge that connects the finite to the infinite. It's this paradoxical thing. And you begin to identify as your soul more than your egoic identity of a limited singular lifespan, and that's super empowering.
I felt that shift slowly over time since we met, pretty much.
Yeah, certain people I think are intuitively tapped into it, but a lot of the traditional technology we had for enhancing our connection to that have been taken from us. And
we take it back and be all right.
Yeah, exactly. I will say that connection here that I see is that most of the control mechanisms that, the Roman Empire turned into the Catholic, the Vatican.
Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah, the Vatican, that whole thing, the Holy Roman Empire, that fear of death became a control mechanism that didn't really exist before.
That's because nobody was afraid of death because they knew it was a natural part of the life cycle.
And to die with honor in a certain way was seen as something
instant
to be
ascension,
sought after. Yeah,
you get apotheosis right there.
That's yoga.
You just graduated from
yoga.
School.
Means yoked to the gods.
Really?
Yeah. And they said the same thing in Vedic stuff, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, no, 100%. If you die in battle, if you die in the daytime, like, there's a whole bunch I think it's in the Bhagavad Gita is one of them that has a bunch of lists of, like, it's better to die in daytime because you're facing the sun or something. Like.
So, yeah, we have all of these stories we live in our modern day life where everything is reinforcing that, like, you're limited. There's no higher meaning. There's you know, when you die, you are going to go to hell, or it's just going to be nihilistic emptiness or whatever. There's a fear of death, so much so to the point that people don't really talk about it or think about it or relate in in relation to it, as opposed to, I think there's another meme. We say send him to the king as like
send him to the king.
You know, a metaphor for killing somebody.
Only those who deserve it.
King Death, because everybody, you know, death is contextually above everything.
All
could just be seen as transformation. I think death has this tinge to it now, but really just the great transformation that occurs.
People don't like death because it's usually stinky. Doesn't smell good.
Well, that's the, you know, physical remain after the spirit has transformed and left it.
That's all you are in reality. Once your soul leaves, you're just a pile of rotten shit.
Well, you don't stink while you're alive. I mean, I guess not in the same way.
I might.
Anyway, but I think of the samurais and like the Hagakure, stuff like that, where they would meditate on death, and even the Stoics, premeditatio malorum, imagining what's the worst thing that could happen and then being okay with that.
Yeah.
Living in relation to death gives a certain regalness.
Yeah.
And with the ancestral stuff, it stops being death, as I was just talking about, as people normally even conceive of death.
You become another chapter in the story of your ancestral memory.
Yeah.
Is what that is. And you could be, you know, the defining chapter. That's what you're here to do. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that you have to do really is to surpass the ancestors that were before you, if you can. And if you can't, well, hopefully your kids can. You know? It's just as important to raise, you know, young people up to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. One thing I like to do is send stuff back and like reimagine the past. It was my own past or whatever, but future self or present self giving advice to younger self. In my memory, I was reading this book on multiverse simulation theory, and he's talking
that's interesting,
as a MIT physicist about and programmer about these natures of like the Mandela effect and how all these different scales of this can happen, and reality's trying to create the ideal pattern for itself. And if you go and like relive the past and remember it differently, you know, you can't prove that the past changed, but you can put yourself onto a different trajectory in the future. And if we feel like we're receiving things from the future higher self, why not be that to the past, the past one? And that connects to the healing and growing that we were talking about earlier.
That's one of them things that's just right in front of your face. You know, and you don't. I didn't see it. I didn't even think of that. It's a really good idea. You ever feel yourself die before, but you didn't?
Yeah.
Yeah, that shit's fucked up. Oh man.
I want to hear about that, but I want to not go too long. Since it's October, I want to talk about the wild hunt because that's connected to what we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Well,
go ahead. I want to hear you talk about it first.
So I think I have a different relationship with the wild hunt as a concept than most other people. A lot of people, from what they've been told, I guess, what's been, you know, passed around in the mythology is that the wild hunt is something to be feared and you know, appeased, lest ye be taken.
What if somebody never heard of the wild hunt before?
Okay. The wild hunt is a spectral host of hunters that ride through the sky, and I mean, it depends on what area you know, the specifics differ, but it's a, you know, inherently European myth, and I guess a lot of people would agree with me, but I think it comes from the old, you know, Koryos mannerbund traditions of, you know, young people, young men getting all, you know, painted up and raiding villages in the night, you know. That's why Odin is considered one of the lords of the hunt, if not the lord of the hunt.
So these things are indigenous European traditions, Proto-Indo-European. You can map it all across the whole steppe continent. And so, like, I think a lot of people feel like, you know, there's no indigenous European stuff, but there is.
Oh, there's plenty. There's so much.
There's a book called The Germanization of
Early medieval Christianity.
Yeah.
James Russell, I believe, is the
So
author.
this is an example of that with Halloween. There's certain Christmas. There's certain things that couldn't be co-opted entirely, I should say they were co-opted entirely, but they couldn't be forgotten or eradicated.
Well, the church, the Catholic Church, Christianity, whatever you want to call it, during the Christianization period of the Germanic tribes, the lands of the Germanic tribes, they had to make a ton of concessions in order to get these wild fucking barbarians to agree, because why would they otherwise?
Totally. And what we've inherited today looks like nothing like before that process.
No, yeah. Modern Christianity looks nothing like it used to, and it's because they couldn't.
But anyway, the Wild Hunt
the German people.
Halloween. So there was this practice that sometimes at the winter solstice, sometimes equinox, or multiple times throughout the year, and where certain groups within the tribe or the village, notably young male warriors, would let themselves become possessed by ancestral spirits. And this is a common motif in all cultures across the world when you see people wearing masks. That's connected with possession cults. And usually, if you look at it, it's connected to ancestors. And even they saw, the what's the word? It doesn't matter. Euhemeristically, where the gods were ancestors that were made into deities over time. And
apotheosized.
Yes, exactly. But anyway, so they would do this and they would parade. This is where like the flying Sabbath imagery comes from, and the idea of carnival, like this wild, crazy thing that comes to town. These are archetypal memories, roots of this thing. But someone would go ahead and like ring a bell and let know that this thing was about to come through town to give people a little bit of a heads up. And when they came through, people were supposed to open their doors up to them and give offerings to the ancestors, as they were like the closest to physical flesh that they were going to be at this time of year. And they would receive the offerings and be happy and incentivized to look over and protect the crops and the people and everything for the rest of the year. It was sort of this reciprocity of exchange. The other side would provide for you if you provide for them, and there's just exchange.
If somebody throws a party for me, I'm gonna help them out.
Yes,
that's all there is to it.
And the thing is that a lot of times these are like hot, fiery spirits that are raucous and scary and could be offended, and some people might be like, that's horseshit, I'm not doing that, and they'd kick in their door and fuck their shit up. And
they only
maybe kill people, maybe rape people. I think that it probably was a really
maybe
scary
in the early Well, you got to think, these guys only get out once a year. That's the only time they have to have fun. You got to give them a break. Of course they're fiery. They've been sitting in the afterlife or whatever.
And it's part of that. I think part of that like this young adolescent warrior archetype that's not necessarily yet have wisdom or discipline.
A lot of steam to blow off, though.
Yeah, died with a lot of inherited trauma and was a part of, a system integrated with that trauma. So there was a lot. I'm not like glorifying this. I'm just saying that like the fear aspect and why we have horror movies and there's like scariness associated with this time of year comes from this thing that would really happen. And so now that becomes little kids who are the closest to the ancestors.
Closer than us, anyway.
Come and knock on your door and you give them a piece of candy and they go on their merry way.
Yeah.
And that, it's sort of the engine of a machine that's not necessarily plugged into source anymore, but it can be, and it is in certain communities and circles where people do such things. I just wanted to touch that because it's relevant for now. But what would you say to people if they're new to these ideas, but they can feel resonance and want to connect to their ancestors, or just the power of blurring life and death in this way, what could they do?
Well, I've said it before in this sit down, in this conversation, but embracing the here and now, embracing what's going on in front of you, being attentive to the abundant signs that are given to you from just existence.
What if you drink fluoride every day and you don't see any signs ever?
I don't know. I don't do that.
Stop drinking fluoride.
Drink. if that happens to be the problem, then maybe you should stop doing that.
They just started, Carolyn sent me something about it today, actually, where there's more widespread admittance of it, and they're starting the process of removing it from water.
That's good.
Scale.
That's good.
Super good. Yeah. Certain court cases have been won. They can prove it is bad for you.
I think everything is bad for you in the quantities that.
Sometimes things that are bad for you are good for you.
That's what I'm saying.
Not fluoride, though.
First of all,
not that one.
First of all, the thing.
We're getting off track. What is the advice?
No. I'm going back. The thing I said before about living, your life to the fullest and experiencing as much as you can with, like genuine, like receptivity to it. Part of that is going to sometimes be something that, someone might tisk at you for doing because it's bad for you. But if you are getting extreme joy from eating a fucking chocolate croissant, go ahead and do it. Who cares? Just, have some, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't have it, obviously. Restraint. Yeah, you need to have a little bit of moderation.
Well, what I don't know how this is. Actually, I do. The way that I think about this and apply what you're saying is recognizing the vast wealth and artistry and ingenuity of human inheritance. Like, on the mundane level, it's like, this is a fucking wall.
Yeah.
But at like a primitive being super present with all it's like, yo, this is a fucking wall. Look at it. It's got these plaster swirls on it. And just like the fact that I'm so wealthy that I don't have to be out in the fucking rain. And a wall is a very mundane example that's hard to like get into. But like appreciating light and all of the things that humans have accumulated a mastery of technologically over time. Yeah. And food and art and music, and really like not taking them for granted. Mm-hmm. There's a way that we can peel off the layers of autopilot. We already know what that is, to just perceive it here and now, and it can blow your fucking mind. If you pay enough attention to anything, it becomes magical.
Well, you can find deeper meaning in anything you look at. The wall is just a wall, but it's also a barrier from the elements, like you said, and a lot of like superstitions.
It's a function of the kingdom that protects the inside from the outside.
Exactly. It's the rook surrounding your chessboard. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, a lot of, superstitions hold that, disincarnate entities such as like fairies won't come through your walls. Not if your house is properly observed and protected in that way that know they exist and they could come.
There's specific things you have to do to protect your
Reward yourself, yeah, of course.
So I would say give candles to your ancestors, light candles to your ancestors.
Everyone should have an ancestor shrine.
Their name, yes.
Modern Mexicans, I believe, have that sort of thing in their house. I don't know who else, but I saw it in Encanto or whatever that movie was.
Yeah, there's a name, I forget what it's called, but
that's dope. Everybody should do that shit.
It's true. It's actually behind the camera.
Yeah, it's over there.
You can't see it right now. There's a lot of shrines.
There's a lot.
Anyway, have you ever heard of a dumb supper? Mm-mm. I think that's what it's called. Somebody took me through it once.
I think I've been to a couple now you mention it. Never at your house, though.
No, it's a Scottish thing where you cook food for your ancestors and set a thing for them and serve them, and you sit in silence and you eat.
You have one place setting for them? Like a spirit plate?
Like if we have my table downstairs, yeah. Everybody gets a full meal served as if somebody's sitting there with their drink and their food. Oh. And you make one for yourself and you sit in silence in honor of them and in connection to them. And, you don't do it like all the time, but once a year maybe.
Yeah.
Cook meals for your ancestors. It's this energetic and informational offering that is very dense.
That's
and
you
rich.
sending love back. back
Yeah.
through the waves, you know?
Yeah, and the benefits of these things can't be overstated.
Yeah.
You really won't know until you connect with it, though. So I just say suspend disbelief and try it. Maybe start a little ancestor shrine.
Yeah, that's
Look up how to make an ancestor shrine on Google or on YouTube and see what resonates with you. And so, any final closing remarks?
No, nothing that I can think of off the top of my head. You know, I definitely recommend doing the ancestor shrine thing too. That's also a very good idea. Other than living in the here and now, doing the best you can with what you get, which could be anything because that's how reality works. Yeah, revere the ancestors and understand your place in the world and in their story. Yeah, that's all I got for today.
All right. Go ahead and like and subscribe and comment to boost the algorithm and share with people that you think would like this. And comment, let us know what you would like us to talk about if there's anything specific. We'll see you next time.
See you later.